بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم وصلى الله على سيدنا محمد وعلى أهل بيته الطاهرين. Merciful Allah, spare me long enough so that I may complete my mission. In remembrance of his undying love and loyalty for his and our Master Abu Abdullah al-Hussein, strengthen your love and loyalty with the salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. The second, in remembrance of his sister al-Masa'ib Zainab, salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. And the third, in allegiance and honor of our current Imam Sahib al-Asr wa Zaman, salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. قال رسول الله صلى الله عليه وآله وسلم أوصيكم بالشباب خيرا فإنهم أرق أفئدة. Now, before I begin, I would first like to apologize for yesterday. Many of you had come to hear the English lecture, and I had promised many people that obviously I would be speaking, but due to some delays, it was impossible for me to go up and speak. I saw a lot of people already tired, and you'd been sitting down for a long time, so I thought it was the insafi on my part to keep you sitting. So instead of doing yesterday's speech, I'm replacing it and rescheduled it to do it today here. The second thing before I continue is that I want to obviously apologize to the men of learning before me. We were in the presence of men who have spent longer than I've been alive learning Islam and teaching and preaching.
Islam, really?
If I am sat here today, it's due to learning from them that I'm able to speak, and I thank them for allowing me to be part of the Majalis.
Turn it louder, both of them.
The hadith that I narrated at the beginning from Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam was a hadith where he explains the importance and the concentration, effort we must place on the youth. And he says, make sure you concentrate on the youth and put your efforts on them, for surely their hearts are soft and kind and delicate. In my introduction speech, I spoke about how when we think of Tarbiyat al-Farzandan, or for example, bringing up our children, we always think automatically that we must have a child first, and it must reach a certain age where it understands, and then we should tarbiyat the child. Because before then the child doesn't understand. All it does is cry and drink milk and sleep, and cry and drink milk and sleep. But this is wrong. And I brought several examples that Imam Ali alayhi salam, when he wanted to think about the children he was going to bring up, he then thought about the wife he was to marry. So after Fatima she passed away, he then asked his brother Aqil to pick a strong woman from a strong tribe so that he can have strong children to stick up for Imam Hussein in Karbala. So we see that actually we have to be thinking of upbringing our children way before we are even married. Now, I then went on and spoke about how it's not only before we get married, but also during pregnancy, that the lady must be very careful as to how she feels, what she thinks, what she does, what she says, what she hears, because all these things have an effect on the child in her stomach. The same way that she's careful as to what she eats, she has to be careful as to how she acts. I then touched on the fact that the man and the woman, the husband and wife, should be stress-free in an environment, in the homely environment. It's what a home is. A home is a place where you go for shelter, to rest. Now, if that place is stressful, then it has an effect on the child, whether in the womb or born. I mentioned that it was due to the stress on women that a lot of children turn out with certain illnesses or diseases later on in life. And even the women themselves become sick with terminal diseases, not just something small like a cold or something. We're talking about cancers, MS, multiple sclerosis, certain diseases that can really affect the lady and even cause death. So we have to understand that stress is something that we can't run away from in a sense, but we have to be able to control and spread it out, as in move it out of our homely environment. Now, I mentioned that the position of women, again, this isn't an attack on women saying you should sit at home, you shouldn't work. No, it's not an attack on women. But in fact, it's actually trying to make the ladies and the men understand the position of the lady when it comes to not only the effect on the male, but the effect on the children. Now, Hazrat Fatima Zahra sallallahu alayha, she was the best example, not just for ladies, but for men as well. And we know that the way she was in the house was unparalleled. You can't find another lady like her. The way she would calm down Imam alayhi salam when he would come home from a stressful day, the way she would always see to her children, and yet she still had time to become a businesswoman in the sense. She owned Fadak. Now, how it was given to her, who gave it to her, who took it away from her, this is all another lecture. But the fact that she was a successful mother first, then businesswoman. As in the priorities were set. She never put her work before her family, before her children, before her husband. The man and the lady are equal, but have different duties. I'm never going to say that the lady is inferior. In fact, in my eyes, I think the lady is superior. Because it's the lady that calms the man down when he comes home. It's the lady that cooks the food, nice, pleasant food, that also helps the man relax. It's the lady that looks after the children and brings them up. Half the world are women, and the other half are brought up by women. So the lady's status here is very important, and we have to understand this. Now, it remains like this, that you have a rock and you have a flower. Have you ever seen, for example, somebody take a flower to drive a nail into a piece of wood? What would happen to the flower? Nothing. What would happen to the nail? Would it go into the wood? No. The flower would end up dying. It would break into pieces. The lady is like a flower, that she shouldn't be exerted to the stresses of the outside world, because it affects her nature. She then cannot do her main job properly. The man is like a rock. You can pick up a rock and drive a nail through a piece of wood or something. So this shows that the tarbiyat, or in effect, the nature of the man and woman are separate. And once we understand that, then we will know that the man's duty is outside of the house and the lady's duty inside. Now, her duty is very high, which again, I'll keep repeating this throughout my lectures. Again, it's not an attack on women, it's in fact showing them that they are important, so important to the household, that the man even relies on her. There's a great English saying that they say, behind every successful man is a successful lady. Now, we understand now that, for example, the stresses of the lady can affect the child while in the womb. But what about after birth? A lot of the time it's a great misconception, or it's a way that we teach new parents that when the child's crying, don't pick it up. Lusmi, shall we say, in Iranian. It'll learn that every time it cries, you run to it, you pick it up, so it'll always cry. Then you can't do your work, you can't go and enjoy yourself, you can't relax. Every time you put it down, it'll cry. This is what we're taught. And it's something widespread that everyone says this. But I'll show you how the mentality of this thinking is actually flawed and wrong and in fact dangerous to the health of the child. In Romania, under the rule of Ceausescu, he had a dictatorship, and one of the problems that they had back then was that contraception was not widely available. And parents were having children over and over again. Many children in a family, 9, 10, 11 children. Now in areas of poverty, the parents could not reach out to their children because they didn't have the money. So they would give these children up to orphanages. They'd adopt them to the orphanage. Now in the orphanages, there would be a very poor ratio of carer to child. So there'll be like one nurse and 20, 30 children, newborn kids, newborn babies. Now obviously the nurse would go around feeding each one with a bottle, but they would never have time to see to the child, to pick it up, to care for it. And they saw that a lot of these children end up dying within 6 months, within 8 months. They would die. And they came and said, what's going on? What's the reason that these children are dying? We're feeding them. They're having food. What's wrong? So they came in and done some experiments on the blood of the child, on the hormones on the child, and they saw that the child was extremely stressed to the point that it was exerting adrenaline and cortisol. Adrenaline and cortisol. 2 different hormones that the body makes when a person is in stress. Now, these children were dying. A lot of them who did grow up had mental disabilities, learning difficulties. They wouldn't attach closely to people. They'd cry. Even when you pick them up later on, they'd still cry because the damage had been done. Now, we're told, don't pick up the child. Let it cry a bit. Let it learn. Let's listen to what... In fact, before I say this, even some parents, I know it's not among us, alhamdulillah, but some parents, I've heard with my own ears, people come to me and ask me and tell me about their experiences. They even hit their children. The baby is crying, and because they can't calm the child down, they hit the child thinking that this will stop the child, but the child cries more. Now, our Prophet, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, 1,400 years ago, look at this. This is what we call modern science. This is what we call modern thinking. But it happened 1,400 years ago. Today we are behind. We are the ones that are still catching up. The Prophet said that when a child cries in the first 4 months, the child is actually doing takbir, or he's, for example, la ilaha illallah. He's doing zikr of Allah. In the second 4 months, the child is sending blessings on the Prophet and on the family of the Prophet. And in the third 4 months, the child is actually asking Allah to forgive and bless its own parents. This is the Prophet speaking 1,400 years ago. Now, whether we say, this is backward thinking, the child, what does it even know? The child can't even speak, child doesn't know what's going on. Even if we're that backward to say this, let's look at the scientific view. The reason the Prophet said this was because when the child cries, without doubt, we get stressed inside. We think, oh, the child's crying. It upsets us. It sets off adrenaline in our bodies, whether we like it or not. It sets off certain stress hormones that increase our blood pressure, increase our heart rate. And if we go to the child in this state, we are in fact giving off a negative energy to the child. Even if we pick up the child will sense that we are also uneasy. And they won't calm down quickly. So in actual fact, they'll be crying for longer. So the Prophet is trying to tell us that, look, when your child cries, it's not crying because it's angry or because it wants to annoy you. No, the child cries in the first 4 months because of this. The second 4 months because of sending blessings. The third 4 months because of asking for forgiveness for you and sending blessings on you. So then our way of thinking changes and we go to the child happy. Not that we sit back and say, oh, look at my child, look at it's doing zek, let me let it cry a bit more, because look at it. No, not for this. It's for us to, when we approach the child, we are, in a way, we reduce our stress. We understand that the child is not doing anything bad. So when we pick up the child, it relaxes. Now, this is an extreme condition, the one about Romania. that the children end up dying when the parents don't pick them up, when they're not cared for. But what about in America and Canada? In America and Canada, they did a study for children that were put into daycare. Daycare, you know, when the parents go off to work, they put their children in daycare, nursery. And they did the same experiments that they did on the children in Romania on these same children. And what they found, that the levels of cortisol and adrenaline and stress hormones in these children were higher than those children who were at home. In other words, what does that teach me and you? It teaches me and you that if we can refrain from going to work and spending time with our children, then we should. Because in actual fact, we are helping them and serving them in their development. Now, I mentioned something called the biopsychosocial model in the first speech, which I said that now sociologists, psychologists, and even some medical physicians, a lot of them like to ignore this theory because it helps them to sell drugs to the families. It helps them to give medication out, and obviously they get commission for it. But if you look at the psychologists and the sociologists and the physicians that are true to their nature, that don't care about their pockets, they say that the child's biology, not even child, human, the human's biology, in other words, how they feel, how they are inside, their state, is directly attached and linked to their psychology and the social environment. So mothers that can stay at home and don't need to go to work, if they care about their children, should stay at home, should look after the child, should be there for the child constantly, because if they're not there and the child is stressed, then the child will grow up with certain difficulties, learning difficulties, memory loss and so on. Not only memory loss, cortisol, one of the difficulties that cortisol brings to the body is that it actually stops the bone maturation. So the bones of the child don't grow fully. They grow in length, we see the child grows tall, but inside the bone is empty. The density is not as it should be. So everything about the child is being affected constantly. Now, I want to give one more example. I don't want to keep it too long. Obviously, the Majalis has already gone on for us some time already. The second example I wanted to bring is asthma. It's been scientifically proven in today's world that children who have asthma, it's directly linked to stressed parents. So those parents who are stressed at home, their children end up having asthma. Now, it's not just, because they live in polluted areas. That's their fault, they live in polluted areas. No, even in polluted areas, they took the children from families who were not stressed and tested them, and parents who were stressed. And they saw the same link was there. That if your parents are stressed, it causes you to have asthma. Now, how does asthma work? Anyone who's had asthma or who studies medicine or anything will know that the bronchi, the airways to the lungs, they have smooth muscle around them, so bands of muscle. And this muscle contracts and dilates according to the amount of air you need. So when you're doing sports and you have adrenaline in your body, your airways dilate to allow more air to come into your lungs. Now this smooth muscle goes into a spasm. It goes into a shock where it starts to constrict without reason. So the child, even if it's not stressed, starts wheezing, starts doing this because the airway has closed. Also from within, the airway the walls begin to inflame. So not only is it constricting, but from inside it's going also inwards. So it's a double constriction on the child's breathing. Now, how do we treat asthma? You've seen them, they have an inhaler. The inhaler actually has two chemicals in them which are complete, identical copies of adrenaline and cortisol. Adrenaline and cortisol are the hormones that our body secrete when we are stressed or when we're faced with a situation. They're secreted from the adrenal gland. Adrenal means kidney, adrenal means on top of the kidney. So this gland, the adrenal gland on top of the kidney, it secretes adrenaline along with some other chemicals, hormones, and then it has a cortex around it, which is like a bark of a tree, like a membrane. And that cortex secretes cortisol. Now, if the inhaler is secreting adrenaline, a copy of adrenaline and cortisol. What do the doctors tell us? They tell us that this child has been stressed so much from a young age that its mechanism to release these hormones has stopped. The mechanism has become tired. Why? Because when the parents shout, the child jumps. When the parents shout at the child, clean up your room, do this, do that, the child jumps. Every time the child jumps, this gland secretes the hormone without it needing to. And because it keeps secreting in emergencies, which aren't actually emergencies, the gland becomes tired. So now, just to keep this child from breathing, we have to give it extra hormones. Do we see the link between stress and biology now? Do we see what we are doing to our children by shouting in the house, by stressing, by bringing unnecessary outside stress into the house? The Prophet said to Ali alayhi salam, he said, Ya Ali, if you're marrying my daughter, make sure you leave the stress outside the house before you come in. Now, obviously Ali alayhi salam, he's ma'soom. He's not going to bring any stress into the house, but the Prophet is trying to teach me and you that as fathers, we need to leave our outside. Whatever happened at work, leave it. We lost the deal, leave it. We couldn't sell something we were selling, doesn't matter. We couldn't strike a business contract, leave it out of the house. And at the same time, women, don't constantly look for ways of sargarmi that could actually put more stress on you. Certain things like ringing your friends to keep busy and listening. Oh, what happened here? At this Majalis, who said what? They said this? Oh, what was she wearing? What was she doing? These things, in the form of ghaybat, we say that obviously it's a sin. This is the reason why it's a sin, because it's bringing certain stresses into your life that you don't need. And then you go and you start thinking, oh, I have to do this. Oh, I have to do, oh, she said this. Oh, I have to behave like that. Leave these things aside. If we want to bring up our children, if we're talking about tarbiyat farzandan, honestly and truthfully, that we want our children to pray and fast and become true muhibbeen and muntaziran of the Ahlul Bayt alayhim salam, then we have to fix ourselves first. And the child will follow. Without doubt, the child will follow. And I'll speak about that in future lectures. I don't want to take up your time too much. وصلى الله على سيدنا محمد وعلى آل بيته الطاهرين.